going on, everybody? Yours truly here again. Hope everyone is having a great first day of the week, Sunday. And hopefully, you guys and gals didn't go out and have too much fun last night. I, on the other hand, stayed home, did a little bit of studying, got lazy, and so on and so on and so on. But, anyways, as y'all can see, this book is gonna take a while to finish. So I think what I'm gonna do is probably finish chapter 2, because it is a real thick book and it's gonna take more than 10 or 15 videos. But I don't know. We'll see what comes to my mind here tonight, tomorrow, whatever, and so on. We have seen through this book the history of the Nimrod system, or as they called it, a scheme here, and how all these people throughout the years have managed to create, take from, or steal each other's idolatrous images and create their own. But as we have also read, it just all goes back to the Nimrod, or to Nimrod. Nimrod personified, or the Nimrod system, as I have shown you in our Bibles. This Nimrod man and or system have always rebelled against Yahweh and his laws. It's very evident to see that all these people have created religions that look so close to what's actually found in Scripture. But deep study, obviously, when you study this kind of stuff, and like I mentioned about the Da Vinci Code book and the video that I saw, you can learn where to draw the line between truth and fiction. So it is what it is, people. There is no denying that Christianity and Catholicism are nothing much but sun cults, while they dare call everybody else a cult just because they're not part of their religion or the modern in-day popular religion. Okay, but if y'all had read the scriptures, the truth of the scriptures, you'll see that the prophets taught about and against idolatry, as well as the Messiah and the apostles. Okay. The simplicity of the truth is just in there in plain, simple, black and white. Okay. Everything and anything and anyone that has to be against idolatry is Yeshua and Yahweh through his word, the law and the prophets. It teaches against idolatry. I mean, we have all read the story. Most of us should have read the story of the Exodus, when the majority of the children of Israel wanted to go back to Egypt or God worship. And when they turned around, the earth opened up and swallowed them, So I think we have a similar parallel in the book of Revelation. But when the day comes, I'll get to that stuff and I'll start covering on prophetical events as I have them written down through my notes and my studies. Okay, but prophecy, like I said, is not for everybody. Not everybody understands it. Not everybody's going to understand it. There's a lot of people still that are hard-headed, saying that, well, man wrote that book and this and that, and there's been so many translations. But like I said, you can only lead a horse to the water. I saw a video. I was watching one yesterday, and it's all about, when I have my full notes on it, I'll give you guys more on it eventually, but it was on the Dead Sea Scrolls, on the Qumran, I guess found in Qumran or whatever they're called. But supposedly a group called the Essenes were the ones that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Supposedly it doesn't go against Scripture or what we have as Scripture, but they were semi-pagan, philosophical, Greek philosophical, Jewish philosophical people. Okay, so when I read that, and I'm gonna read more on it, I already started actually making notes last night, but that already tells me a lot. Okay, you see, the religio-political system was based on those three groups of people. It was the Pharisees, the Essenes, and the Sadducees. I still have yet more to read on the Sadducees, but these were the people Yeshua told his disciples to follow because they were appointed to Moshe's seat. And when he said, do what they tell you, but do not practice their customs, because they preach but do not practice. So, but once I read that part about them being philosophical Jews and Greeks and whatever else and anti or semi-pagan, I was like, that says a lot. That explains clearly who those people were in the times of the Messiah. So whether those Qumran scrolls or Dead Sea Scrolls are word for word per se of the Hebrew scripture, then so be it. But they were supposedly like they kept surviving. I don't know how. If it's that article I read on the Jewish Encyclopedia online was that they never had sex, so they could reach the most highest levels of holiness, whatever that means. But anyways, so yes, I'll continue here, and like I said, I think what I'm going to do is finish chapter 2, because there's still a bunch of it. And like I said, it's going to take a lot more than just 10-15 scriptures. But let me just, if y'all can see this much, it's about 1/4 of an inch more on chapter 2. That's a lot of videos. Okay, so I'll see what I can come up with. If y'all have comments about something Christian or Catholic y'all want me to cover that might be in this book, let me know in the comment section below. Feel free to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. And we'll take it from there. Okay. And continuing in the Two Babylons, chapter 2, Objects of Worship, this section here is called The Meaning of the Name Centaurs. It says, the ordinary classical derivation of this name gives little satisfaction, for even though it could be derived from words that signify bull killers, and the derivation itself is but lame. Hopefully this video comes out right. I have my phone turned the other way now. Such a meaning casts no light at all on the history of the Centaurs. Take it as a Chaldee word, and it will be seen at once that the whole history of the primitive Centaurus with a K entirely agrees with the history of Nimrod, with whom we have already identified him with. Centaurus is evidently derived from Can, a priest, and Tor, T-O-R, to go round. Centaur, therefore, is priest of the revolver. Actually, it's Kohan or Cohen of the revolver. That is, of the sun, which to appearance makes a daily revolution round the earth. The name for a priest as written is just KHN, and the vowel is applied according to the different dialects of those who pronounce it, so as to make it either Kon, K-O-H-N, Khan, K-A-H-N, or Ken, K-E-H-N. But in the same sense, in the language of the Aztecs and the Mayas, I've told you that C-A-N, Khan, actually means serpent. Like Vatican means divining serpent. So I still understand why Mormons are so intertwined with serpent worship. Tor, T-O-R, the revolver as applied to the sun, is evidently just another name for the Greek Zen or Zan applied to Jupiter, as identified with the sun, which signifies the encircler or encompasser. The very word from which comes our own word sun, which is Anglo-Saxon, was Sunna, S-U-N-N-A. That word seems familiar. And of which we find distinct traces in Egypt in the term SNNU, SNU, as applied to the sun's orbit. The Hebrew Zon, Z-O-N, or Zawan, Z-A-W-O-N, to encircle, from which these words come in Chaldee, becomes Dan or Dawan, D-A-W-O-N. Wow. that caught my attention because here, years back when I was younger, we had, I think there were Arabs or Hindu people that used to run this hotel here in town. I think it got knocked down, but they were called Dawas. It was called Dawas Hotel, and yeah, so that caught my attention of it. Don or Dawan, and thus we penetrate the meaning of the name given by the Boeotians to the mighty hunter, Orion. There we go. That name was Kandawan, Kandaon, as appears from the following words of the scholiast or scholiast on Lycophron. Sounds more like leprechaun, quoted in Bryant. Orion, whom the Boeotians also call Kandaon, Kandaon then, and Centaur were just different names for the same office, the one meaning priest of the encircler, the other priest of the revolver, titles evidently equivalent to that of Volcan. Almost sounds like Vulcan, huh? Or priest of Baal or the sun, which there can be no doubt was the distinguishing title of Nimrod. As the title of Centaurus does exactly agrees with the known position of Nimrod, so the history of the father of the Centaurs does the same. We have seen already that though Ixion was by the Greeks made the father of that mythical race, even they themselves admitted that the Centaurs had a much higher origin, and consequently that Ixion, which seems to be a Grecian name or Grecian name, Greek, had taken the place of an earlier name according to that propensity particularly noticed by Salverte, which has often led mankind to apply to personages known in one time and one country myths which they have borrowed from another country and an earlier epoch. Their sciences. Let this only be admitted to be the case here, that only the name of Ixion be removed, and it will be seen that all that is said of the father of the Centaurs or horsemen archers applies exactly to Nimrod as represented by the different myths that refer to the first progenitor of these Centaurs. Which one is the cow, half man, half god? Monitor? Yeah. First then Centaurus is represented as having been taken up to heaven, that is, as having been highly exalted through special favor of heaven. Then in that state of exaltation he is said to have fallen in love with Nephil, who passed under the name of Juno, the queen of heaven, or Nephil, whatever. The story here is intentionally confused to mystify the vulgar. Hold on. Okay. The story here is intentionally confused to mystify the vulgar, and the order of events seems changed, which can easily be accounted for. As Nephil in Greek signifies a cloud, so the offspring of Centaurus are said to have been produced by a cloud, but Nephil in the language of the country where the fable was originally framed signified a fallen woman. Because it sounds a lot like Nephilim. It does mean Nephil, and that is Greek, but the Hebrew is Nephilim, the fallen ones. A fallen woman, and is that from fallen woman, therefore that the Centaurs are really said to have sprung. Gods, huh? Now the story of Nimrod as Ninus is that he fell in love with Semiramis. She was another man's wife and took her for his own wife, whereby she became doubly fallen as a woman, and fallen from the primitive faith in which she must have been brought up, and it is well known that this fallen woman was, under the name of Juno or the dove, after her death worshipped among the Babylonians. There's a dove people in the Christian belief. Centaurus, for his presumptuous and pride, was smitten with lightning by the supreme God and cast down to hell. This then is just another version of the story of Python. Sounds like Python. Asclepius and Orpheus, who were all smitten in like manner and for a similar cause. In the infernal world, the father of the Centaurs is represented as tied by serpents to a wheel, which perpetually revolves and thus makes his punishment eternal. In the serpents, there is evidently reference to one of the two emblems of fire worship of Nimrod, Vulcan. If he introduced the worship of the serpent, as I have endeavored to show, there was poetical justice in making the serpent an instrument of his punishment. Then the revolving wheel very closely points to the name Centaurs itself as denoting the priest of the revolving sun. To the worship of the sun in the character of the revolver, there was a very distinct allusion not only in the circle, which among the pagans was the emblem of the sun god, and the blazing wheel with which he was so frequently represented. This is from Wilson's Parsi Religion. But in the circular dances of the Bacchanalians, hence the phrase Basiridum rotator even, the wheeling even of the Bacchantes, hence also the circular dances of the Druids as referred to in the following quotation from a Druidic song. Rudy was the sea beach, whilst in the circular revolution was performed by the attendants and the white bands in graceful extravagance. That the circular dance among the pagan idolaters really had reference to the circuit of the sun, we find from the distinct statement of Lucian in his treatise on dancing, where speaking of the circular dance of the ancient Eastern nations, he says with express reference to the sun god, it consisted in a dance imitating this god. We see then here a very specific reason for the circular dance of the Bacchae and for the ever-revolving wheel of the great Centaurs in the infernal regions. Wow. Some pretty amazing stuff, huh? The serpent is starting to come up here. Next section is section 3, called The Child in Greece. It says, thus much for Egypt. Coming into Greece, not only do we find evidence there to the same effect, but increase of that evidence. That God worshipped as a child in the arms of the great mother in Greece under the names of Dionysus or Bacchus or Iacchus is by ancient inquirers expressly identified with the Egyptian Osiris. This is the case with Herodotus, who had prosecuted his inquiries in Egypt itself. Whoever speaks of Osiris as Bacchus. To the same purpose in the testimony of Diodorus Siculus. If y'all have been paying attention, y'all can almost dare to agree that all these names that end with US have come from Greece, Rome, Egypt, as the name Jesus also implies with the US. I'm just saying, people, I mean, it's very obvious. Orpheus says he introduced from Egypt the greatest part of the mystical ceremonies, the orgies that celebrate the wanderings of Ceres and the whole fable of the shades below. The rites of Osiris and Bacchus are the same. Those of Isis and Ceres exactly resemble each other, except in name. Oh. Now, as if to identify Bacchus with Nimrod, the leopard tamer, leopards were employed to draw his car. He himself was represented as clothed with a leopard skin. His priests were attired in the same manner, or when a leopard skin was dispensed with, the spotted skin of a fawn was used as a priestly robe in its stead. This very custom of wearing the spotted fawn skin seems to have been imported into Greece, originally from Assyria, where a spotted fawn was a sacred emblem, as we learn from the Nineveh sculptures, for there we find a divinity bearing a spotted fawn or spotted fallow deer in his arm as a symbol of some mysterious import. That image, if you look it up, actually has the same imagery, the same resemblance. I think he's holding up like some kind of a branch with a deer, and then almost in the same instance, you have Santa holding, I think, Rudolph and the Christmas tree, something like that. I've seen it plenty of times. The origin of the importance attached to the spotted fawn and its skin had evidently come thus when Nimrod, as the leopard tamer, began to be clothed in the leopard skin as a trophy of his skill. His spotted dress and appearance must have impressed the imaginations of those who saw him. Not necessarily wearing a dress, but the way he was dressed, okay? His attire, in other words. And he came to be called not only subduer of the spotted one, for such is the precise meaning of Nimr, Nimr, almost comes from Nimrod, the name of the leopard, but to be called the spotted one himself. We have distinct evidence to this effect borne by Damascius, who tells us that the Babylonians called the only son of the great goddess mother Momis, Momis. It does signify mother because of mom, mommies. I call my girl mommy, is like calling her baby, but anyways. Now mommies or maumis is Chaldee, like Nimr signified the spotted one. Thus then it became easy to represent Nimrod by the symbol of the spotted fawn, and especially in Greece and wherever a pronunciation akin to that of Greece prevailed. The name of Nimrod, as known to the Greeks, was Nebrod, Nebrod. The name of the fawn as the spotted one in Greece was Nebros, and thus nothing could be more natural than the Nebros, the spotted fawn, should become a synonym for Nebrod himself. When, therefore, the Bacchus of Greece was symbolized by the Nebros or spotted fawn, as we shall find, he will symbolize what could be the design, but just covertly to identify him with Nimrod. Yeah, people, look that up. Look up the imagery or the origin of that Santa figure holding the spotted fawn or deer or whatever, and you see, I think it's like a Grecan imagery, a guy with the wings, not an alien, holding the spotted fawn with the, I can't remember what kind of branch it was. We have evidence that this god, whose emblem was the Nebros, was known as having the very lineage of Nimrod. From Anacreon, we find that a title of Bacchus was Aethiopais. Aethiopais. It's spelled Aithiopais. That is the son of Aethiops. But who was Aethiops? As the Ethiopians were Cushites, so Aethiops was Cush. Wow. Chus, Chus, says Eusebius, was he from whom came the Ethiopians, Aethiopians. Oh, wow, that's cool. The testimony of Josephus is to be the same effect, as the father of the Ethiopians, Cush, was Aethiops by way of eminence. Therefore, Epiphanius, referring to the extraction of Nimrod, thus speaks Nimrod, the son of Cush, the Aethiop. Now, as Bacchus was the son of Aethiops or Cush, so to the eye he was represented as in that character. As Nin, the son, he was portrayed as a youth or child, and that youth or child was generally depicted with a cup in his hand. Kind of like the Pope, huh? That cup to the multitude exhibited him as the god of drunken revelry, Bacchus, and of such revelry in his orgies no doubt there was abundance. But yet, after all, the cup was mainly a hieroglyphic, and that of the name of the god. The name of a cup in the sacred language was Kus, almost like Cush, Khus, and thus the cup in the hand of the youthful Bacchus, the son of Aethiops, showed that he was the young Kus, or the son of Cush, Chus. In a woodcut, the cup in the right hand of Bacchus is held up in so significant way as naturally to suggest that it must be a symbol. And as to the branch, in the other hand, we have expressed testimony that it is a symbol. But it is worthy of notice that the branch has no leaves to determine what precise kind of branch it is. It must therefore be a generic emblem for a branch, or a symbol of a branch in general, and consequently it needs the cup as its complement to determine specifically what sort of branch it is. The two symbols then must be read together, and thus read they are just equivalent to the branch of Chus, Chus. That is the scion or son of Cush, Sion. It just brought something to my. Y'all can see I'm gonna start doing Daniel here pretty soon. My vivid imagination. Pope with palm and chalice. Well, I guess not. I used to really like the incense they would place in our churches. But anyways. Well, there's just so much imagery of the Pope with the palm. I just thought he had one with the chalice come together. But anyways. There was another hieroglyphic connected with Bacchus that goes not a little to confirm this. The ivy branch. No emblem was more distinctive of the worship of Bacchus than this. Wherever the rites of Bacchus were performed, wherever his orgies were celebrated, the ivy branch was sure to appear. Ivy in some form or other was essential to these celebrations. The votaries carried in it their hands, bound it around their heads, or had the ivy leaf even indelibly stamped upon their persons. Oh, let's look that up. Now I'm just saying, but to me, it looks like that's what they make the wreaths out of. Or even the crowns of like Caesar and all that. It's very much Celtic. I don't know if y'all can see that. Okay. What could be the use, what could be the meaning of this? A few words will suffice to show it. In the first place, when we have evidence that Kisos, the Greek name for ivy, was one of the names of Bacchus, and further that though the name of Cush in its proper form was known to the priest in the mysteries, yet that the established way in which the name of his descendants, the Cushites, was ordinarily pronounced in Greece was not after the Oriental fashion, but as a Kisioi, Kissioi. Thus, Strabo, speaking of the inhabitants of Susa, who were the people of Kusistan, or the ancient land of Kush, says the Susians are called Kisoi. That is beyond all question the Kushites. Now, if Kisoi be Kushites, then Kisos is Kush. Then further, the branch of ivy that occupied so conspicuous a place in all Bacchanalian celebrations was an express symbol of Bacchus himself. For Hesychios assures us that Bacchus, as represented by his priest, was known in the mysteries as the branch. Ooh. Now we know in scripture and prophecy there is somebody who is called the branch, but that's another study all in itself as well. From this then it appears how Kisos, the Greek name of ivy, became the name of Bacchus. As the son of Cush and as identified with him, he was sometimes called by his father's name, Kisus. His actual relation, however, to his father was specifically brought up by the ivy branch for the branch of Kisus. Now I can't remember reading much of this book, but I think this is going towards the mistletoe. I think. His actual relation, however, to his father was specifically brought up by the ivy branch for the branch of Kisus. which to the profane vulgar was only the branch of ivy, was to be initiated the branch of Cush. Now this god, who was recognized as the scion of Cush, since we're talking about branches, it probably is speaking about somewhat of like a Zion, because that is what is used, for the grafting of the Gentiles to the Israelites and so on. Okay. And was worshipped under a name which, while appropriate to him in his vulgar character as the god of the vintage, did also describe him as the great fortifier. God of fortifications, huh? That name was Basarius, which in its twofold meaning signified at once the houser of grapes or the vintage gatherer, and the encompasser with a wall. In this latter sense, identifying the Grecian god with the Egyptian Osiris, the strong chief of the buildings, and with the Syrian Belus, who encompassed Babylon with a wall. Thus, from Assyria, Egypt, and Greece, we have cumulative and overwhelming evidence, all conspiring to demonstrate that the child worship in the arms of the goddess mother in all these countries, and the very character of Ninus or Nin, the son, was Nimrod, the son of Nimrod, was not a son of Cush. But that is what this book keeps implying. Okay, again, read that chapter. It lists the sons of Cush, and then it says that Cush begat Nimrod. A feature here or an incident there may have been borrowed from some succeeding hero, but it seems impossible to doubt that of the child Nimrod was the prototype, the grand original. The amazing extent of the worship of this man indicates something very extraordinary in his character, and there is ample reason to believe that in his own day he was an object of high popularity. Though by setting up as king, Nimrod invaded the patriarchal system and abridged the liberties of mankind, yet he was held by many to have conferred benefits upon them that amply indemnified them for the loss of their liberties and covered him with glory and renown. By the time that he appeared, the wild beasts of the forest, multiplying more rapidly than the human race, must have committed great depredations on the scattered and the straggling populations of the earth, and must have inspired great terror into the minds of men. I think these kind of books would be kind of cool to hear like that, huh? Somebody speaking in that in that language. The danger arising to the lives of man from such a source as this, when population is scanty, is implied in the reason given by God himself for not driving out the doomed Canaanites before Israel at once, though the measure of their iniquity was full. I'm going to do that one of these days, is try to do a video of me speaking like a fool, that is. Exodus 23, 29, and 30, it says, I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against thee. By little and little I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be increased. The exploits of Nimrod, therefore, in hunting down the wild beasts of the field, and ridding the world of monsters, must have gained for him the character of a preeminent benefactor of his race. By this means, not less than by the bands he trained, was his power acquired, when he first began to be a mighty upon the earth, and in the same way, no doubt, was that power consolidated. Then over and above, as the first great city builder after the flood, by gathering men together in masses and surrounding them with the walls, he did still more to enable them to pass their days in security, free from the alarms to which they had been exposed in their scattered life, when no one could tell, but that in any moment he might be called to engage in deadly conflict with prowling wild beasts in defense of his own life and those who were dear to him. Within the battlements of a fortified city, no such danger from savage animals was to be dreaded. And for the security afforded in this way, men no doubt looked upon themselves as greatly indebted to Nimrod. Seems kind of a same parallel to Revelation 13:3 about how everybody worshipped or wandered or followed or worshipped the beast. No wonder, therefore, that the name of the mighty hunter, who was at the same time the prototype of the god of fortifications, there it is again. Should have become a name of renown. Well, they were known as renowned men of tyranny, I guess. Had Nimrod gained renown only thus, it had been well, but not content with delivering men from the fear of wild beasts, he set to work also to emancipate them from that fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. It's not fear. Again, this is the whole study of critical word use in the scriptures. Yeah, sure, we should fear our Father for being sinners, and we get these curses upon us, like Moshe said. But that word fear should actually mean more like reverence, to follow, to worship, and to obey. That is how we get wisdom. I read a scripture a few videos back that says, "Great wisdom have they who do your commandments." Okay, we do not get understanding if we fear our Father, which is the beginning of wisdom, and in which alone true happiness can be found, or true joy. For this very thing he seems to have gained as one of the titles by which men delighted to honor him, the title of the emancipator or deliverer. The reader may remember a name that has already come under his notice. That name is the name of Phoronius. The era of Phoronius is exactly the era of Nimrod. He lived about the time when men had used one speech, when the confusion of tongues began, and when mankind was scattered abroad. He is said to have been the first that gathered mankind into communities, the first of mortals that reigned, and the first that offered idolatrous sacrifices. Wow. Actually, it was Cain who offered the first idolatrous sacrifices. Because if you look up the phrase tiller of the ground, it actually means servant of the gods. Because Cain was a God worshiper. He offered per se half-assed sacrifices to Father Yahweh, and that's why he didn't look upon his sacrifices the way he did his brothers. Okay, so tiller of the ground means servant of the gods. I need to look that up. So actually Cain was the first. And I guess we can say from Cain, this whole Nimrod system came pretty much, but it's all tied in. I mean, it's somehow tied in together. This character can agree with none but that of Nimrod. The name given to him in connection with this, gathering men together. Where have I read that? Gathering men together. Let me and offering idolatrous sacrifice is very significant. Phoronius, in one of its meanings and that of one of the most natural, signifies the apostate. That name had very likely been given him by the uninfected portion of the sons of Noah. But that name had also another meaning, that is, to set free, and therefore his own adherents adopted it and glorified the great apostate from the primeval faith, though he was the first that abridged the liberties of mankind. As the grand emancipator, and hence in one form or another this title was handed down to his deified successors as a title of honor. I was looking at pictures earlier or this morning, and I keep coming across all these little words as the author hints them down here. But I mean, it's a whole more or less different subject, but it's idolatry, this whole idolatrous system. We see a lot of the pagan symbology rather in the Statue of Liberty, how it has a chain broken at the bottom of her feet. And if you look up in Revelation, how it says that the dragon was tied down with a chain, you know, it could mean something. I'm just saying. I accept it as factual in a sense, but at the same time, it's supposed to, that chain is supposed to be free from, I forgot what it was, but if y'all know what it means, y'all can look it up or look it up and see what it means. But of course, we know the history of this country was that people came over here from persecution of the church. But at the same time, all this idolatry and serpent worship just snuck its way in here at the same time. But anyways, so that thing about how the government cannot establish a religion here, whatever it's in the Independence Declaration or whatever the amendments, it's actually bull crap, because they have established a religion in this country. Oh, let's see. All tradition from the earliest times bears testimony to the apostasy of Nimrod and to his success in leading men away from the patriarchal faith and delivering their minds from that awe of God and fear of the judgments of heaven that must have rested on them while yet the memory of the flood was recent. And according to all the principles of depraved human nature, this too no doubt was one grand element in his fame. For men will readily rally around anyone who can give the least appearance of plausibility to any doctrine which will teach that they can be assured of happiness and heaven at last, though their hearts and natures are unchanged, and though they live without God in the world. How great was the boon conferred by Nimrod on the human race in the estimation of ungodly men by emancipating them from the impressions of true religion and putting the authority of heaven to a distance from them, we find most vividly described in a Polynesian tradition that carries its own evidence with it. John Williams, the well-known missionary, tells us that according to one of the ancient traditions of the islanders of the South Seas, the heavens were originally so close to the earth that men could not walk, but were compelled to crawl under them. This was found a very serious evil, but at length an individual conceived the sublime idea of elevating the heavens to a more convenient height. For this purpose he put forth his utmost energy, and by the first effort raised them to the top of a tender plant called teve, about 4 feet high. There he deposited them until he was refreshed, when, by a second effort, he lifted them to the height of a tree called kauriki, which is as large as a sycamore. By the third attempt, he carried them to the summits of the mountains, and after a long interval of response, and by a most prodigious effort, he elevated them to their present situation. For this, as a mighty benefactor of mankind, this individual was deified, and up to the moment that Christianity was embraced, the deluded inhabitants worshipped him as the elevator of the heavens. Weird. Now, what could more graphically describe the position of mankind soon after the flood and the proceedings of Nimrod as Pholonius, more like Pholonius, the emancipator, than this Polynesian fable? Well, I mean, a lot of it is, if not all of it. It's a fabrication that all these people have done, and putting all these things together somehow, one way, shape, form, or another, connecting other gods that were called different names in different countries. Mostly everybody had the same practices. As I've told you in a few videos back, even those prophets, so-called prophets of the Lord or Baal in the times of Elijah, they couldn't bring down the fire of God, so they were doing these dances and lashing themselves and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was their practice. That was not the practice of the true worshipers of Yahweh, because the law prohibits us from cutting ourselves and piercings and tattoos and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, it's all fables, stories, myths, legends, all this kind of stuff. I think one of my favorite ones, I'm not necessarily saying I believe in it, but it's the one of Will of the Wisp. Supposedly, this guy's walking the earth because hell didn't want him, and heaven didn't want him either, so hell didn't want him. So the devil let him roam the earth with supposedly 2 charcoals in his pocket or whatever. That's kind of cool. Anyways, so continuing here, let's see how much time we got. Got a few more minutes. While the awful catastrophe by which God had showed his avenging justice on the sinners of the old world was yet fresh in the minds of men, and so long as Noah and the upright among his descendants sought with all earnestness to impress upon all under their control the lessons which that solemn event was so well fitted to teach, heaven, that is, God, must have seemed to very near to the earth. To maintain the union between heaven and earth and to keep it as close as possible must have been the grand aim of all who loved God and the best interest of the human race. But this implied the restraining and this countenancing of all vice and all those pleasures of sin after which the natural mind, unrenewed and unsanctified, continually pants. This must have been secretly felt by every unholy mind as a state of unsufferable bondage. The carnal mind is enmity against Yahweh, is not subject to his law, neither indeed is able to do so. We know that that's in Romans chapter 8. Okay, to live a life of sin, like the Christian doctrine teaches us, or teaches the people that they are no longer under the law, then they are living under the law of sin. That is a fact. That is in the book of Romans chapters 6, 7, and 8. Okay, Romans 7:1 clearly says that the law has authority over a man until his death. Now, obviously, the law has no hold on you. Okay, but anyways, I've already covered that in a video. Okay, it says to the Almighty, depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways. So long as the influence of the great father of the new world was in the ascendant, while his maxims were regarded, and a holy atmosphere surrounded the world, no wonder that those who were alienated from God and godliness felt heaven and its influence and authority to be intolerably near, and that in such circumstances they could not walk but only crawl, that is, that they had no freedom to walk after the sight of their own eyes and the imaginations of their own hearts. Ooh, prophecy. There is a similar prophecy that speaks similar to what I just read. That says that people have called Yahweh's law a burden, that nobody can keep those laws, that law supposedly appointed weak men, but I covered a video that that's not what it is talking about. It's talking about the law of the Levites, the Levitical priesthood. Okay, in reference to that, notice what it says here in Jeremiah 18. It says, starting from chapter Jeremiah 18, verse 11, it says, now therefore speak to the men of Yada, Judah, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, this is what Yahweh says, behold, I am preparing adversity against you and devising a plan against you. Turn back now everyone from his evil way and reform, or make your ways and your doings righteous. But they said, there is no hope for that. So we will walk according to our own devices, plans, and we will all do the imagination of our evil hearts, follow our own stubborn inclinations. There you go, people. In reference to that. That was Jeremiah 18, 11 through 12. I know there was another one. Oh, here's the other one, Jeremiah 23, 33 to 35. Cool. All right. So anyways, continuing. Okay. From this bondage, Nimrod emancipated them by the apostasy he introduced, by the free life he developed among those who rallied around him, and by separating them from the holy influences that had previously less or more controlled them. He helped them to put God and the strictly spiritually of his law at a distance, and thus he became the elevator of the heavens, making them feel and act as if heaven were afar off from the earth, and as if either the God of heaven could not see through the dark cloud or did not regard with displeasure the breaker of his laws. Then all such would feel that they could breathe freely and that now they could walk at liberty. For this, such men could not but regard Nimrod as a benefactor. If y'all had read the history of the scriptures, the history of the 12 tribes of Israel, how a lot of them went back to God worship, back to Egypt. That's what that means. They were telling Samuel, they said, no, we don't want Yahweh as our ruler. Give us kings like the other people have over there. This was exactly forbidden in the law of Moses. When Yahweh told Moshe told the children of Israel, when you go into that land, do not inquire of the people's gods. But that's exactly what they did. The gods of the Canaanites. I'm not saying they were the Canaanites, but that was more or less what came to pass when they did that. When they didn't want Yahweh, they wanted a god or a king to rule over them. So, like what this is saying, these people became slaves to the Nimrod system. So the people of that time, like Yahweh told Samuel rather, they became servants of all these people, of the gods, okay? Worshippers of gods and images and idols and whatever. So their children, the daughters and the men, and, they all became slaves. So in this sense, people are still, in this sense, slaves to the Nimrod system, in a system of rebellion against Yahweh and his laws. Okay. So their God has become their benefactor and claiming and giving them that sense of freedom, that sense of playing on the emotions of your mind and your hearts, that somehow, even though it's not scriptural, that somehow you are already saved and all you got to do is believe. Okay. So anyways, now who could have imagined that a tradition from Tahiti would have illuminated the story of Atlas? But yet when Atlas, bearing the heavens on his shoulders, is brought into juxtaposition with the deified hero of the South Seas, who blessed the world by heaving up the superincumbent heavens that press so heavily upon it, who does not see that one story bears a relation to the other. Thus then it appears that Atlas, with the heavens resting on his broad shoulders, refers to no more distinction in astronomical knowledge, however great as some have supposed, but to a quite different being, even to that great apostasy in which the giants rebelled against heaven, and in which apostasy Nimrod, the mighty one, as the acknowledged ringleader, occupied a preeminent place. According to the system which Nimrod was the grand instrument in introducing, men were led to believe that a real spiritual change of heart was unnecessary. There you go. That's what I just said. And that so far as a change was needful, they could be regenerated by mere external means. Looking at the subject in the light of the Bacchanalian orgies, which, as the reader has seen, commemorated the history of Nimrod, it is evident that he led mankind to seek their chief good in sensual enjoyment, and showed them how they might enjoy the pleasures of sin without any fear of the wrath of a holy God. Just finished saying that. In his various expeditions, he was always accompanied by troops of women and by music and song and games and revelries, and everything that could please the natural heart. He commended himself to the good graces of mankind. That's what I've been saying, people. That's what I just said anyway. It's not verbatim, but in the same sense. The real spiritual change of heart has come upon the plane of the emotions of the people, the minds of the people, and Christianity looks so real. It looks so close to the truth, but it's not. It's still pushing God worship upon the people, mother son God worship, all this kind of stuff. and people blindly go in there with, you know, feet first, I guess, running swift to evil per se, like the scriptures say. But we're seeing now a lot more who the Christian Catholic benefactor is, like it says in the title of the book. Hopefully y'all can read it straight now. Okay, but these things have no real spiritual significance, no holy significance. Okay, if you take the time and look up the images of a lot of the religions throughout the world, you'll see a lot of similarities. You'll see beads, rosary beads in the Catholic Christian religion. You'll see not necessarily a rosary, but beads for the Buddhists, and Islam or the Muslims have the same thing. They also have a circle of beads. I think I even read a commentary in one of my booklets when I covered the Queen of Heaven videos that the rosary was for praying to the 99 names of God. That is exactly what Islam has as well. So, like I said, people, y'all need to look at the similarities and say, am I really part of the true faith? Probably not. Most likely not. No. Okay. So again, people, I can't fathom enough for y'all to buy that book. It is very deep. I can follow that book and, like I said, see the similarities, but know exactly where to draw the line with all that stuff. Okay. So again, y'all have a great day. Comment section is open. Leave your questions and comments, whatever y'all need me to find or help you find, and I will do my best to get you those answers. Okay. And until the next video, y'all have a great day.